Hi, welcome to week number 3 of the Scrap Block Quilt Sampler. This is a 52-week series where you get to use your scrap stash and make a new scrappy block each and every week. My name is Lori Dickman. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. I love to hear from my viewers. Today what I'd like to share with you is a block called the State Fair, and I'm calling it the State Fair Finale because by the end of September most state fairs across the country are finished, and so I thought this was an appropriate block for us to work on this week. So let me share with you how this is done, and that way you can actually get to work on that this week. And before we get started, I'm going to share a link below in the description box. It is for my tutorial on how to cut, sort, organize, and store your scrap stash. I've got that tutorial all ready for you. It will really help you to get your scrap stash all organized and ready to use to make beautiful scrappy quilts. So in the description box below, you are going to find the PDF for the State Fair Finale block. This is the block we're going to make. All of the information that you need for this particular block is there, along with the circle template that you'll need for the center of that block. So make sure that you save that PDF and print it out so that you'll have that available. Again, when you go through that tutorial that teaches you about how to cut, sort, and organize your scrap stash, you'll understand how to get your stash ready to go. These are my 3-inch blocks here that I have, and I've actually pulled some of these squares from this particular container. I do store my scrap stash in these plastic containers, and I make sure that I label them. And I sort them by lights, mediums, and darks. So for this particular block, you are going to be needing 2.5-inch squares. You're going to need 16 lights, which I have right here. You're going to need 8 2.5-inch darks, and I'm using purple in this block right here. You're going to need 1 4.5-inch green square for that center background square, and then you're going to need 1 4-inch blue, which is going to be for the circle. And your colors may be different than what I've chosen, but I'm just identifying them for you here so you know which one is being used on which part of this particular block. Then for the half square triangles, you're going to need 4 of the 3-inch darks. In this case they're reds, and 4 of the 3-inch lights. So these are all the squares that you need to pull from your scrap stash for each of these blocks that you'll make. So this block is simply put together in 4 patch units. The outer 4 corners are 4 patches put together using the lights here, and these 4 patch units are put together using my purples and half square triangles that I create using the reds and creams. And that is what those 4 patch units are made with. And then the center is a 4.5-inch green, and then when the whole block has been put together, then we're going to applique the blue circle onto that center unit. So let's take this to the sewing machine and we'll figure out how that's done. Again, we're going to have to make a template using that circle from the PDF. Make sure that you create that template, which I've already done. You can purchase template film from Hobby Lobby, Joann's, online. You can purchase it from many different locations. And as you can see, I've just laid it on there, traced it, cut it out, and then I'll be able to create my circle and applique that onto the block when I'm done putting the block together. So the first thing that we can do is simply sew the 16 light 2.5-inch squares together into 4 patch units. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing those together in simple 4 patch units. Let me move the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. So what I've shared with you is I've sewn 2 patches together, and now I'm taking each of the 2 patches and I've just cut them apart so that I'm creating an actual 4-patch unit from those lights. I'm putting them together and nesting the seam allowances like this, and then sewing those together. So here are the 4-patch units that I've sewn together in the lights. These are the light 2.5-inch squares, and I'm going to take them to the iron and press them, and then make sure that each of them is squared up to 4.5 inches. I'll be right back. So now we're going to make our half square triangles, and we're going to use our, in my case, I'm using the red 3-inch squares and the cream or the light 3-inch squares, and I'm going to put them right sides together. And I have 4 pairs of them right here. They are right sides together. I'm going to draw a diagonal line across each of these squares. Just like that. And then we are going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side of those diagonal lines. And you'll notice I'm doing this in assembly line fashion. Basically, I'm chain piecing. I'm sewing a scant 1/4 inch, which is a thread or 2 less than 1/4 inch on each side of the diagonal line that I drew. Now I'm going to cut them apart in sections, and I'm just going to trim off the little tips just like this, right there. I'm going to do that to all of these. Now I'm going to cut on the diagonal line. All right, I've cut them all, and now I'm going to press each of them to the dark, and we have a total of 8 half square triangles. Once I have them pressed, they each need to be squared up to 2.5 inches square. I'm going to press them, and I'll be right back. So now I'm squaring up all of my half square triangles. I've got most of them squared up already to 2.5 inches. I do have a little 2.5 inch square up ruler, but you can use larger ones to square up your squares. You simply just need to follow that diagonal line. It's the 45-degree line on the ruler, line it up on the seam allowance, and then make sure that you're squaring each of these up to 2.5 inches. It may not appear that there's much fabric that has to be removed, but it's very important that that does get removed, because that will affect how the block goes together. All right, so they're ready to go. Now we're going to lay out the block. So first we need to lay out each of the 4-patch units that create that half square triangle unit. So let's see how we're going to do that. What I have done is laid mine out. I wanted to make sure each of the 4-patch units for the half square triangle is different. So I have laid out my purples here in 2 piles of 4, and my half square triangles in 2 piles of 4. And I'm going to simply sew them together in this fashion. Let me move the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm starting by sewing 2 of the purples together, and then I'm going to sew 2 of the half square triangle units together. Make sure that they are laid out appropriately. Follow the guide on the PDF and it will show you how each of these half square triangle units or squares should be oriented within each unit. So that's 1 4 patch there. And now I'm going to grab 2 purples. I'm going to grab the next 2 sets of half square triangles. And that will create my second half square triangle unit. Here's the 3rd set of purples with the 3rd set of half square triangle pieces. Here we go. And the 4th set of purple squares. With the 4th set of half square triangle units. And when I cut them apart, I'm simply going to cut them apart in sets. So that's 1 set, there's another set, there's a 3rd set, and here's the last set. So when I open this, I have a 4 patch that I can sew together, which has the 2 purples on top and the half square triangle units below. So I can put this together, nest my seams. I want to nest my seams, there we go, and get this sewn together. So there's 1 4 patch. It's a half square triangle 4 patch. Here is the second one, right here. Gonna nest those seams. And here's the 3rd one. Again, nest the seams. When I say nest the seams, I mean that 1 seam allowance is going off to the right and 1 is going off to the left, and then they nest beautifully together. So this top one is nested to the left and this one is nested to the right in the back. And we'll sew this last one together. All right. Here we go. Here are our 4 patch units, the half square triangle 4 patch units. I'm going to take it to the iron and press the seams to the dark, and then I'm going to make sure to square up each one to 4.5 inches, and I'll be right back. So here you see I've laid out my block. It's basically a 9 patch now. Each of the corners are 4 patch units that were made up of the 2.5 inch lights. And then these are the 4 half square triangle units that were made up of the purple squares and the half square triangles. So we have 4 of those. And then the center unit is simply the green 4.5-inch square. Your colors, of course, may be different than mine, but this is just how to identify. So what we're going to do is web the block first, get it sewn together, and then we're going to applique the circle onto the center green square. So we have the first section webbed, column 1 and column 2 are webbed together, and now we're going to web column 3 to the rest of the block. Now you can see we have the block webbed. Now we just need to web the rows together. So I'm going to sew those now. I don't normally pin, but I've gone ahead and pinned all of these seams so that they nest where I want them to nest, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this. I'm sewing row 1 to row 2. So those 2 are sewn, and then I'm going to sew row 2 to row 3. I'm going to pin it first, and then I'll stitch it. So I've just pinned the last rows. I wanted to make sure that they all nest properly, each of the seams, and I'm putting them together. There we go. Now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and press it. I'll be right back. So my block is ready. I've put it together, and I'll square it up here in a minute to 12.5 inches. But right now I do want to cut out my circle so that I can applique it to this center block here. So what I'm simply going to do is trace this template onto the back, the wrong side of this blue 4-inch square, and cut it out. And I like to use glue-based applique. It just keeps the fabric nice and soft without the fusible, but you're welcome to use any applique technique that you like. I use Roxanne's glue-based, and it has a very fine needle nose here, and there's just a teeny tiny little dots of glue that come out, which I think works beautifully for putting the drops around the outside edges before we attach it to the center of the circle. I'll be right back once I draw this and cut it out. Okay, so I have cut out my blue circle with my template that I had created, and now I can applique it down to my center circle, and I'll use the Roxanne's glue baste to baste it down. So I'm simply going to take a little dot of glue and place it on the outside edge around the outer perimeter of the circle, and press it to the green square. You don't need much, just enough to keep it there until you get it sewn. Now I'm going to set up my machine with a beautiful royal blue thread that will match the blue circle. I'll be right back. So I've set up my machine with a royal blue embroidery thread on the top, and I'm going to bring up my bobbin thread, and I'm using a kind of a fancy stitch on my machine here. I do like to take advantage of using the fancy stitches that you have available whenever you're appliquing. and there we go. It's all appliqued. So here is the completed State Fair finale block, and in mine it's creams, purples, blues, greens, and reds. I look forward to hearing what colors you're going to be using and what fabrics each of you will be using in your State Fair finale block. And I hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you next week with week number 4, Scrappy Quilt Block Sampler Quilt. Have a great week.